Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of 20 Percenters, where we focus on what matters: health, wealth, relationships, and time. And I've got the immense pleasure of sitting down with Sage, founder of Sage Aubrey, today. Appreciate you really making the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We sat down a couple of months back now. Has it been that long?
I think it
Yeah.
has. Like,
Too long.
summer has come.
Yeah. And I got to hear the cliff notes of your story, and I really want to dive into your purpose-driven mission with Sage Aubrey. You've had quite the roller coaster in the fashion industry. Self-made, done it all yourself essentially. Obviously built a solid team to make it sustainable. But you've kind of intentionally removed yourself from certain scenarios that didn't match the mission of your brand.
Mm-hmm.
So, for everybody who doesn't know how we got here, kind of share with us your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sage Aubrey currently is my third fashion company. I started my first fashion company with my mom and sister. When I was in high school, we started an accessories business. That was something that started literally like with garage sale signs out on the side of the corner of our streets and, pointed people to our house. And we started selling goods just outside of our house. And then it turned into a boutique inside of our house. And then from that, we ended up growing it to be large enough that we distributed goods all nationwide. So that was really cool. And that was an incredible experience at such a young age. And having my first entrepreneurial venture that young, I think I discovered my love for the challenge of something entrepreneurial, and then also how authentic it feels to create something and also vulnerable at the same time, but that how you can build something. And I learned that at a really young age. And I also learned that we bootstrapped it. So I learned that you could bootstrap something and also make a really good living out of doing something. And learning that in your teens is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So after I graduated high school, I went to Fashion Institute Design and Merchandising. I actually dropped out. I came back to Phoenix to pursue a university education. And as I was going to school, sitting in classrooms, I was bored out of my mind. And so at 22, I convinced my parents that I should open my first boutique because I really ultimately thought that I'd have like my stores and then eventually I'd sell all this like chain of stores off and I'd eventually start my brand. And so that was really like the fantasy of it. So at 22, I went to market and I signed leases and I opened my first store the day after Thanksgiving when I was 22.
Black Friday, huh?
Yeah, and I ended up calling every single person that was on the list from the business that we had in high school. This was only about 4 to 5 years later, and reintroduced myself and what I was doing. And so many of those people from that first business came out and supported me on this second business and the second venture. It was incredible. And that business I had pretty much instant success with, which you never hear of really in business, but I got super lucky and had that business for about 6 years. The economy crashed in 2009 and unfortunately lost the businesses. Or actually, I really chose to fold it because I was at a point where I didn't see the small boutique business. Now, I owned a chain. I had online shopping, and I did pop-ups everywhere, kind of before pop-ups were like ever a thing. And but I didn't really foresee the industry coming back for a long time. So I kind of made the decision that I'd never really ever been deeply into the red line in the business. And so it was time for me to really rediscover who I was or what I was going to do. And that was the time to do it. I got married. We got this job opportunity. My husband got a job opportunity in Malaysia. So we ended up moving over to Kuala Lumpur. Now I have like literally just went from working 7 days a week constantly since I was like a young girl to kind of crickets and just like hanging out over in Malaysia. And I was like, I can't do this.
Right. You
like
can't go from that to housewife.
Yeah. And I didn't really, and it was weird because like I feel like I had always hustled for this identity. And I was like, well, who am I and what am I doing? Like, I can't just be sitting here like wasting time is how I looked at it. And so one day I went to the bookstore looking for inspiration. I picked up a book called Half the Sky, Turning Women's Oppression into Opportunity. And the book, I read through it and it accounts different atrocities that are committed onto women and girls. And I was captivated by these stories, and not because it was something that was like, oh my God, you know, it was one of these things where it was like, how does this exist in this world that I'd never known enough about it, and that I had made money since I was a young girl, and that I'd never taken a chance to donate or do something to give back.
So what kind of atrocity, what kind of
sex
things?
trafficking, intergenerational prostitution, child brides. So this book accounts these different lives of these women. And it's one of those books where you have to like read a chapter and put it down and just like detox from it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But it's incredible, because for me, it was truly life-changing. And so I just started to see the world in a different way. I read that book a few times over again. I threw it at my husband one night. I was like, you have to just read this, because I'm going to do something. And I'm in the epicenter of where a lot of these issues exist, which is just crazy. So I ended up writing a bunch of the founders from these different stories in the book, and just introduced myself and said, I'm here. I can be between India, anywhere in Southeast Asia and Thailand and everywhere. And I said, I'm of value, of service, whatever you need. Here's the experience that I have. This is what I can do. And so the founder of Apnea Women Worldwide got back to me right away. And she is like the pioneer of anti-sex trafficking in India. She invited my husband and I out to her action centers, and we ended up touring with her. And after day one with her at her action center in Delhi, I wrote my family and friends at home and said, this is what I've witnessed, and I want to do something.
Yeah.
And it was like...
Not to cut you off, but what goes on at an action center?
She basically sets up in very impoverished areas. She goes in and sets up these community centers that look like community centers. But what she does over time in these community centers is that she starts letting these women and girls know. Now, she knows these are like red light centers, you know, so she makes it look like the kids can come in there and get educated.
Okay.
But what she really ends up doing is getting these women identities and helping them get out of these cycles that they're in.
Sure.
But you have to do it in such a way low key.
Right.
And where the men and the people in the community don't actually think that this is what's really going on. And so she basically saves one woman or one child at a time.
Like it's Underground Railroad style. Yeah. Okay.
And I mean, she's been like stabbed and shot. I mean, she's like hardcore, this woman, because what she does, so many people, she's fighting against like a mobster sort of community that makes these people a lot of money.
Right.
So after meeting these women and girls and hearing their stories and going to these action centers, I was like, whoa, like this is going to be my work here. And so anyhow, I, for 2 years, ended up getting heavily invested into advocating for anti-sex trafficking and raising money for Apnea. And I got pretty deep into the world where I was sitting on panels at the Clinton Global Initiative with some really very high up social status names, because a lot of people hadn't experienced and really gotten in the ground and really understood what was going on. And that was one thing that my husband and I did. So we spent most of our weekends for a couple years traveling throughout Southeast Asia, throughout India, throughout Thailand, going through all these impoverished areas and learning as much as we could about what the issues were that were plaguing these women and girls. And we would go back and we would have events. So we would have friends who started a 501c3, and we'd start hosting these events and raising money for these organizations and giving them back. Got super into this world. And just as I got deeper into the world, started to see the red tape. Started to be at these events with all these who's and everything, and started to realize that I just felt like I was at the right place at the wrong time. And I started to realize that in order for me to make an impact, I needed to somehow have a business that would be able to financially sustain the efforts that really my husband and I ultimately wanted to do for women and girls. Because raising money and going through the grant system and starting to realize who gets all of the money and all the situation, it's just like, okay, I get it. Now I need to create a company or something that I can like know that I could financially sustain what I started.
So what was it that you were witnessing in that philanthropic environment? Not enough of the money raised was actually going to the cause of the people that you were claiming to support?
I think that.
Is that what you were...
I think that, but I also think a lot of these people who do get significant funding have never really been on the ground. They've never really seen what's gone on, what they're supporting.
Yeah.
And so they're getting all this money and they're throwing money at things where I don't necessarily know that that's exactly what these communities need.
Right.
And it's a long, sustainable model.
Yeah.
And it's staying embedded in communities for not just 1 year, 5 years. It's being there for, a decade to 2 to 3 decades.
It's so interesting that you say that because Jeff and I, my old co-host on my previous podcast, went and did an exercise with Milam Byers. Do you know who he is?
Oh, sounds familiar.
So he runs an organization called Striking Out Poverty. And we went through this 3-hour exercise about how poverty becomes generational, right? In these third world countries, where, you're pretty much giving up a kidney every once in a while to sustain a living. And if you get too far in debt, you go live under the bridge, right? And what was really interesting, what came of this exercise was that, like you're describing, throwing money at the issue doesn't solve anything. And in some instances, it makes the issue worse. Right.
It leaves a community worse off than it was.
Because like you were saying, for some of these people that are raising this money and just, throwing it at the problem, they're not getting their hands dirty. So the strategy behind what you do with that money is moving in the wrong direction potentially, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just it's a slippery slope because everyone wants to do good, but then sometimes you start to get in and you realize, and that was one of the things that I came into philanthropic work so green. I just thought, we'll just give you all this money and we'll get you computers and it will be good because we're doing our part. And then it's like, oh no, you can't just go in there and start giving things. You've got to learn what this community needs and how to actually support it properly.
Build out infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right people in the right places, that whole thing. Right.
Yeah. So I believe I went on this journey. I went on the journey for a reason. For one, it changed me as a woman in the way that I'll ever foresee doing business and and giving back. I think it opened me up to realizing that this journey and whatever I do next, which was Sage Aubrey, it wasn't just about me and an ego and creating something. It was about an opportunity to eventually be able to give back. And that was something that was really important to me. And it's also interesting coming into the industry that I'm in with this sort of mindset and these stories of these women that I carry with me that have given me strength to be able to get through a lot of shit and a lot of really, really hard times, because if you're just doing it for yourself, it's easier to give up, I think.
Absolutely.
So I feel also a sense of responsibility because I've seen so many women and girls in such less fortunate situations where I always look at those women, and if I could put them into my life or women's lives over here, there would be nothing that would stop them from conquering what they could, because they've seen so much and the worst that every day for them would be an opportunity to become this woman that they want to become with all this opportunity. So I think about that because I have this sense of responsibility to the women who don't have the freedom yet, to keep fighting for it for them, whether it's in a Western way or whichever way, we have to do it. I think we just have this sense of responsibility for women and more women. And I don't mean that in just being like rah, 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 but to get into businesses and start building things with integrity and for different reasons. So I have this, I don't know if you call it weight, but I just have something that I carry with me that's
purpose.
Yeah. So, we ended up moving out of Malaysia and we lived in Hong Kong for a little bit, and we moved back to the US in 2012. And we wrapped up the last few charity events that we were doing to support these organizations. And I told my husband at that time, I said, okay, I'm ready to move on and to do something that's going to have a greater impact and start speaking to women in an authentic way that I know how to speak to women, which has always been through fashion and style. And so I just started to throw around ideas of what I could do to get back into being a creative, which I am, but also with this new driven sort of purpose within me.
Sure.
So I started, one day I was talking with my husband. I read through InStyle magazine, And at the time, this handbag designer named Rebecca Minkoff was blowing up. And I was like, and she seemed like just this ordinary kind of woman that made it. And I was like, you know what? I showed my husband, I was like, if she can do it, I can do it. And so it was that day that we decided to start moving forward with building Sage Aubrey. And it took me about 3.5 years of really, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse or not, but getting my ass kicked.
Sure.
17 times over again. I really thought I was going to get into this, kind of had this ego.
Yeah.
Because in all my other businesses, I kind of just had done well and made money and things had come easy. And then I got into the other side of the fashion business, which is design and manufacturing and product development. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I kind of went into these first manufacturers and had a few sketches and was like, yeah, this is what I want to create. And they were like, it's shit. Like, this is this is bad.
Yeah.
And I remember at that moment thinking, holy crap, like I've got to actually get my shit together here.
What's your ego saying to you in those moments? Because
I'm so determined.
Right?
I wasn't really proven, not to anybody in the fashion industry, unless you protege with somebody, and unless you have distribution and you have done something really significant.
Okay.
It is a closed door policy there.
Yeah. So what constitutes like significant? Like having your line on the runway at Fashion Week in New York City, or like
that's it, or maybe protegeing with like a Dior, a Karl Lagerfeld, or working for Tory Burch for years and making contacts.
Right.
And so most people come into this industry with deep contacts.
Got it.
I had zero.
Okay.
And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to make a sample. I didn't know what a sample consisted of. I didn't know, I knew nothing other than I was just going to put some ideas together and I was going to create this handbag line.
So how is this process so much different than what you were doing in the world of boutique?
Well, in the world of boutique, I mean, I still did everything anyways. But the difference was that now I'm ultimately creating the product that someone else is selling.
Okay.
So I was initially going to trade shows and buying product, merchandising it in my stores, and then selling it.
Okay.
So now I was at a point where now I was creating the product that people were going to ultimately purchase or sell.
Right.
So that is complicated. And I really just I just always thought about it, which I do with a lot of things. I go in so naively and I'm like, oh, it's going to be easy. I'm just going to like design this bag and it's going to be like manufactured. And then I didn't realize that really I'm more in the business of manufacturing than I am design.
Okay.
Manufacturing, like design is 5% of what I do now.
Sure. Yep.
Rather than, really initially when I got into it, I thought, oh, I'm going to be this designer and I'm going to design. And, like you have this glossy, very fresh, naive idea about what you're going to do. And then you get into it and you're like, no, really, I'm like a manufacturer.
Yeah.
And I play every role because every designer, what's really interesting about designers is that generally they create a product that they want, but they're designing it, they're manufacturing it, they're marketing it, they do everything. So it's kind of a fascinating journey.
Yeah.
In that, you build something for this idea. So anyhow, I got into this manufacturing world and I started sampling with all these sample makers and manufacturers, and they were all telling me that I was shit and that I should just go like hang out with my husband.
Wow.
And time and time again. I mean, this is like, it was a very reoccurring thing. And I mean, now looking back, I understand why they thought my product was shit.
Okay.
But I don't think what they didn't realize was like the determination that I had to make something beautiful. And what I didn't get in the beginning, which no one does in this industry because it's a really hard industry and it's hyper competitive and it's difficult to make it. And like they all say, 99% of people that come in fail, and they do. And it's a rough world, the fashion world, and most people don't see it that way, but it's tough. And so when I got into it, I didn't realize that the sampling and the designing process, the process of an artist, the process of a creator, it takes time to hone a talent.
Right.
It takes time to create beautiful product. It takes time. You've got to to master something. You've got to make it. You've got to take all these mistakes that you make constantly and turn them into something beautiful.
Yes.
So I wish I would have met someone early in the journey to say, hey, this is like really ugly today, but keep mastering what you do and perfecting hone your talent.
Yeah.
And you can be really good at what you want to do. And I never had that in the beginning. So it's like I almost like had to go up this 90-degree angle to learn everything about design and creating a beautiful handbag and a beautiful product.
Yeah.
And that in itself, these people master these, craftsmen, they spend their lives mastering their art.
Right.
So it's almost like I had to master the design. I also had to master the, to bring this product together. It's complicated.
Sure.
It's not easy.
Right.
And I thought it was going to be easy. And, but that didn't deter me from doing it. But I think it would deter majority of people because you go from one sample maker, from one manufacturer to another manufacturer to another manufacturer. And it's the near impossible task to create something that's actually beautiful.
So what was when was the catalyst that your product turned the corner and went from shit to great?
So I ended up at a manufacturing facility in the Dominican Republic, and I was in a terrible manufacturing relationship there. The people did not have the capability to be able to sew what I was creating.
Okay.
And on top of that, they had zero willingness to help me. Like zero.
So what are you looking for in terms of help?
Understanding how to even bring a handbag together, leathers to use, how to splice leather, how to bring leather together, how to line leather, how to use zippers, how to use lining, how to source all this stuff, like how to even design something, how to even, design something that you can actually sew. So there's so many elements that you have to bring together in order to create something. And so I'm there at the manufacturing facility and I'm sampling, and I get these partially the best looking samples that I had in 2.5 years. So I'm there at the manufacturing facility, and I would get there before the workers got there, and I would leave after the workers got there. And I was on my line constantly, and I was trying to learn every bit of information that I could from any sample maker and anybody that would give me any time, because I knew I was never going to survive if I did not learn every bit of information that I could. I mean, I would walk around that manufacturing facility. I have notes. I have notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks on information that I had learned to try to make me better. I mean, I studied this thing. I wouldn't sleep at night. I would literally stay up all night trying to figure out, stitches per inch on certain bags and what made them beautiful and how did it make them beautiful.
Sure.
And so it became an obsession.
Yeah.
Like it literally, what I was set out to do, I didn't realize that it would ultimately become my obsession. And I didn't realize that I was so obsessed with proportions and, the fine details of what makes someone a good designer.
Sure.
I didn't realize I had that in me, but it's
that's cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so I dug really deep, and I was on my line one day, and there was a industry vet there, an industry designer vet or a designer, and he was working for Hartman. I tell the story to everybody because he was a catalyst in my journey, and I still try to communicate with him as much as I possibly can today. And one specific day, I was having a really, really hard day. And he came over to me and pat me on the back, and he was overseeing my production and giving me some notes. And he's like, you're never going to get what you need here. And I was like, F you. Like, I basically just told him, I was like, fuck you. I'm trying to make things work here. Yeah. And I don't need people like you coming over to my production line telling me that I'm never going to get what I need here when I work my blood, sweat, and tears. Like, I work myself to death here trying to get what I need. I was like, this is all I have. I can't get into Italy. I was like, no one else is willing to work with me. Everyone's giving me too high minimums. So this is going to have to work. Like, I was like in tears, like just, torn apart. And he was like, well, look, I'm going to do something for you. He's like, because I really have never seen somebody take so much pride in what they do. He's like, when I leave here, give me a week, and I'm going to try to dig up some of my old contacts from Italy and see if there's a way that we can get you in the door there. And I just started bawling, crying, because I was like, I knew it's what I knew the only way for me to get into Italy was through an introduction. Because I tried every other avenue, and it just doesn't work. Either they'll give you really high minimums because they don't want to work with you because you're emerging talent, because you haven't proved yourself, you have zero distribution, everyone fails. Everyone tells you this. So he ended up making an introduction for me. A few weeks later, after I'd gotten home from the Dominican, my husband and I took a trip over to Italy to go to the leather show to meet this manufacturer. They met me initially. They were like, no, we don't want to work with you. And I was at a meeting with them at a restaurant, and he was there with his daughter. And they started kind of bantering back and forth. And she looked at me and she goes, my dad doesn't want to help you, but I do. And so I basically ended up setting up shop in a little town outside of Milan. And this incredibly kind woman taught me everything about building out a bag in Italy, all of the right terminology, how the different types of lining, like everything that I could every detail. I mean, I'm kind of minimizing it, but every detail that I could ever need to learn about building out these samples and producing and manufacturing, she taught me. And so she was really the person that now I've moved on since then and gotten into better manufacturers as my distribution has gone up, and have built a reputation for myself of having having integrity in my business and paying my bills and everything. And as you do that, you build a reputation and more people want to start working with you. So I don't technically have the greatest distribution today, but everything that I do is I always pay my bills.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference when you do business,
Sure.
especially in the manufacturing world. You know, money speaks, and so does your reputation, especially in the industry in Italy, because everyone tends to know each other.
Sure.
So what's also interesting about this story was I was sampling my product one day, and I was down on the manufacturing floor, and this woman comes in there, and she is an industry vet, had no idea. She works for all the large companies, Ralph Lauren, Tumi, everyone that produces high-end bags, basically in Italy. She oversees a lot of their quality control.
Okay.
So she's overseeing my samples, and she's like, oh, you're doing a really good job here. And she's like, I'd like to learn a little bit more about your story. So I was like, great. She's like, well, do you want to have lunch with me today? I was like, yeah, you know, I'm here by myself. It'd be really nice to go out with someone other than like by myself or with the manufacturers that hardly speak any English. And she's Italian, but she speaks really good English. So we go to lunch that day and forge this really cool relationship. When she left that day, she was like, here's my card. Whatever you need, let me know. And she now works for Sage Aubrey, and she oversees all my quality control and my tanning, which is the leather industry. She oversees all my leathers. And she is the reason why I've gotten into the manufacturers that I'm into today is because she has officially and totally opened me up to all of her contacts in Italy.
She vouched for you?
Yeah, and she's been with me for a few years now, and she fights with me for the Italians. She fights to negotiate contracts with them for me. I mean, I pay her, but she's also somebody that I truly believe I couldn't do this without her.
Right, she's an advocate.
And she is almost 70 years old. She's been in the industry for a long time.
Yeah.
And she is friends with all of the manufacturers and works with all of the big brands.
Sure.
And knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
And so, although I'd gone through so much in trying, now from the time I started sampling, this was 3.5 years that it took me to get into Italy.
Right.
This is 3.5 years of going from one bad relationship to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next.
Right.
And so, you know, it was pretty incredible the moment that I actually launched like my sample collection out of Italy. I was also pregnant at the time with my first daughter. So I get pregnant all throughout this whole thing. I launched in late 2015, and I had my daughter in spring of 2016.
Okay.
And so now I'm like, oh, I've just spent almost 4 years like trying to get this thing off the ground. I officially launched my sample collection. I remember one day I was in tears with my husband. I was like, how am I ever going to now create a business when I just had a baby? And I was having a really hard day one day, and I get this message on my emails, and I was like not hardly ever getting messages because like I was just like literally just launched a sample collection. Like I, you know, it wasn't normal that I was like getting 20 emails a day or anything. So I get this email come into my phone, and it's the buyer for Bloomingdale's in the Middle East. And they had interest in my product. And so they asked to see the product. So my husband and I end up flying over to Dubai with our 2-month-old daughter, and I presented my sample collection that I had just built out with the Italians to her. And she ended up buying the full collection for SS17. So that really launched, I would say, my career. And I don't know if it was like a stroke of luck from a fairy godmother, because those stories don't exist a lot in fashion.
You had an overnight success that took 4 years.
Yeah, that took 4 years. Yeah. But so I think the story gets interesting.
Yeah.
So we launched in store with Bloomingdale's in spring of 2017. And simultaneously, we were seeing on celebrities and all of kind of the fashion influencer girlies at the time were wearing the bags.
I mean, you're all over the red carpet if you follow your social.
Yeah,
So
we have some. Yeah, we've got some really incredible. But yeah, so we've had some really incredible women wearing the bags, and you know, from getting the Bloomingdale's wholesale order, then we started building global distribution, and I was like, why do I feel so empty? Like, why do I feel like is this what it's all about?
Right.
And so I didn't really understand why I was feeling that way, but I just started writing things down and just started asking the universe, kind of like I do, like what's going on, you know, because at that moment that any designer who had gotten into this industry, that would for them would be the ultimate,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
And so as I got deeper into this industry and started meeting more fashion executives and people at the top and people who factor the large orders and own all the brands and the whole bit, I started to realize that there was a commonality. I really felt like a lot of these people didn't speak about women with a lot of respect. And although they're 80%, 85% of the consumers in the fashion industry, I felt like there was such a lack of, like I said, respect or sense of dignity for women.
Yeah. Now, to be a little more specific, going back to our conversation a couple of months ago, what I discovered is how male-dominated the industry is at the top. So
it's all dominated by males.
Okay.
There are a lot of times the fashion buyers and directors and merchandisers are females.
Okay.
But generally the people who are
touching the bags
factoring, who do all the buying for the large retail stores. I haven't met a man who does that yet.
Okay.
Now, there probably are men in like the more menswear and stuff like that.
Sure.
But at like when you get to the top of a lot of brands and the people who factor, which is the financiers of these brands, it's all male dominated.
Interesting.
But I found even with some of the women that I had met, the way they spoke about selling to women seemed very derogatory to me.
Interesting. Yeah.
And
like, how does that messaging come across that it feels derogatory to you?
So for instance, they would, first of all, they never really respected, I felt like, me as an emerging designer. I always felt like there wasn't a lot of respect for who I was as someone who was partnered with them as well. They would give me terrible buying conditions. They just basically use and abuse these emerging designers. It's very difficult to even actually ever get paid by these large retailers unless you're factored with one of the 3 factors that own basically every brand in the fashion industry. So I never really realized how in bed everyone was with each other. And when I would go into these big buyer meetings, and they would be like, you know, you need to create cheaper product. Women just want cheap things. And you're not trying to just sell them 1 bag at one time. You're trying to sell them like 3 bags at one time. That's how they talk. And I started thinking about that. I was like, do women really just want cheap stuff? Like, do they just want cheap? Because they'd be like, you shouldn't manufacture in Italy. No one gives a shit about Italy. You need to manufacture in like China or Korea. Like, they're like, oh, but Korea creates some like good, like actually like good product. You should just sell there. And then you can sell like 3 bags at one time. And I just would think about this, and like this was something, it wasn't that exact same conversation all the time.
Right. Something like
but the fact that someone continuously kept telling me that women just want cheap things, that irritated me because it felt really derogatory.
Yeah.
Then the way they spoke about selling to women, I was like, that's disrespectful. So I just started getting obsessed with this idea that this industry doesn't fully respect women,
even though that's the market,
even though it's the people who dominate the sales in the marketplace, right? So then I started researching luxury brands, and I started to go into all these nice stores that I was sold at, and I was also starting to go into like the Gucci's and the Louis Vuittons and all these big places, and I'm like, why is it so intimidating in here? why is it so scary to come into these stores?
The
You feel like
customer
you're being
experience.
judged. The
Okay.
customer experience. You
Sure.
walk into these icy stores or these luxury high-end stores, and you feel like you're automatically being judged.
Sure.
Or if you're touching something, it's like a privilege that you're touching something, or they slip on their white gloves. And it's all just this environment where you feel like you're being intimidated.
Yeah.
So I got further obsessed with it. I was like, there has to be some psychological reason why they do this. So I started to research why luxury brands and like high-end luxury department stores create these settings, because they know that intimidation sells. So the more they intimidate their customers and make them feel like, you know, they're being judged and like they're like someone's doing them a favor for them just being in there and taking out these bags and these like little white gloves and stuff, they know that that scares people into purchases.
Get at it. Oh, because so I don't want to waste your time by just
like don't waste my time.
taking a look at it.
Like
interesting.
You're
That's a sales
privileged to be
tactic.
here.
Interesting. Okay.
It's a major sales tactic
Sure.
that they have been using for years to con people into purchasing.
Yeah.
And they also know, I did even more research, that it doesn't make someone feel that good. But because they monopolize the market so much,
Where else would you go?
what else do you do?
Right.
So I became obsessed with the fact that women weren't being respected in the places that they should go when they're rewarding themselves,
Right.
or they're working their asses off and saving up to buy something that makes them feel really good.
Right.
So I was like, this is all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to research how fashion brands were built.
Right.
And they built their brands on this idea that their product that they offer is the iconic, that's iconic. Rather than the woman really wearing the product that is really the icon piece.
Right.
And this bag or this product that she wears tells the story of who she is. So what's interesting is that, like, when you look at a woman and she's wearing, let's just say a high-end designer, let's say she's wearing Hermes or she's wearing Chanel, generally you just see the bag. You don't see the woman. And so I became further obsessed with, I'm like, I want my women to be seen. And I want this bag that she wears to tell this story of her approachability and her powerfulness and her brightness, but a sense of connection. So rather than wearing a product that says, F you, don't talk to me, I'm too rich, I'm too cool, I got these vibes going that like, I'm not approachable.
Right.
I'm like, we have been doing this wrong to women the whole way, like this whole time.
Sure.
The way I see it is completely opposite. The woman is the icon, and this product that I sell tells the story of who this woman is. And she's approachable, and because she's approachable, she's powerful.
Yeah.
And that's the way I see, that's how I see fashion moving forward.
Yeah.
That I think it's the new era of luxury. You've got to respect women. A woman needs to, when she goes in to buy something nice for herself and she's rewarding herself,
Right.
it should be an uplifting experience.
Sure.
She should not feel scared or intimidated into or being sold to
Right.
into this idea of what luxury is.
Right.
And so my goal with Sage Aubrey is to reinvent what luxury looks like. And everything that is to respect women.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't that I'd walked down a path into Sage Aubrey, the direction that I thought I wanted to go, I would have never come upon wanting to build, I don't even think upon is a real word, coming upon like who a community and,
Right.
you know, doing something that I could either be just like everyone else in the fashion industry and exploit women and market to them in an ugly and non-integral way. Or I had the opportunity to take a lot of risks and to stand back from a lot of my partnerships that I was in.
Sure.
And to say, you've got to respect me.
Right.
But not only do you have to respect me, you also respect the people who come into the store. And ultimately you need to respect women.
Yeah.
And you need to give me really good contracts that don't exploit me.
Sure.
And you also need to start respecting and talking to women in a less derogatory manner.
Well, I mean, it's those principles that you stand on that actually forced your hand. I remember you telling me that you actually pulled your line from a major retailer for all of those reasons, right? Was that a tough decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an ultimate decision, but I think at the end of the day, like I said, I have a responsibility as a woman-owned business, and I am a real small little guy, but unless people start stepping up and saying, hey, this is the way that business should actually look and run.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be disrespected in this journey of creating and rewarding yourself. You can actually feel really good when you come and shop in a store, and you can be respected because your business here is actually respected.
Right.
And I just decided that if I was going to build a business and I was going to do something that represented women, I damn well need to build a company that respected women all the way through.
Sure.
It wasn't just like, oh, this is what we do, and you know, we're trying to fluff things. I don't believe in that. Right. And so I have to take risks in order, I think, to do something extraordinary in this industry and build a product around a community, and have this different idea of looking at a woman, seeing her wear a Sage Aubrey and say, she's my kind of woman. I can connect with her. She's approachable. I want to go meet her. You know, like that's the kind of thing that I want to create, because I think women do better when we're connecting. Right.
So wrap this thing full 60. Where does Sage Aubrey come back into your philanthropic efforts?
Yeah. So my big goal ultimately is to create a business that I can give back indefinitely. My big goal for this year, which I hope that we hit, is to be able to donate 1,000 backpacks and school supplies to girls all over the world, whomever would need it.
Awesome.
I have a bunch of old product that was just from my early days. Yeah. And for the holiday season, we're going to stuff all of, and I think it's like around 50 bags or so. We're going to team up with a couple of the really big female charities here. I don't want to say them yet because it's not like a totally like done deal yet. Yeah. But I want to donate handbags to them filled with just essentials for women.
Cool.
Yeah, which is another really big thing. So I think the more successful the company becomes, the more I'm going to start giving back and doing and getting back to the roots of why I wanted to start Sage Aubrey.
Sure.
And but I knew I couldn't start giving back until this company was capable of doing that. Right. So I've always been really transparent about it. It's been my journey and it's where I want to go, but I can't do it until the company truly becomes like a for-profit company, so we can really start donating back.
And I think that's, I guess before I dive into my insight on that scenario, was there ever a point where you lost sight of that?
Yeah, well, when
because I mean, it's been long, it's been arduous, it's been fucking tough. You know, was there ever a point where like you were so in the now that wasn't in the picture?
Yeah, well, I mean, just because I know this is a business podcast. So when I first initially launched, I launched like a 1-for-1 scheme that we were like, someone would buy a handbag and we would donate one handbag back. Like, I mean, one backpack and school supplies back. And all they had to do was simply register their bag online. I started to realize that people weren't registering their bags. Okay. So I was like, okay, well, this doesn't make any sense. Something's wrong here. So then I made the decision to start taking all of it out of my branding and to figure out how I was going to get back to. And then I started to realize, well, oh my God, I've got to actually like make money to give money. Like I can't just be like, I have no money to give right now. Like I want to, but I've got nothing to give. I've got a business that I've got to like create here and get off the ground. Okay. So in a sense that maybe I lost sight a little bit that way because I had to figure out how to actually make money in this industry. Yeah. But if today I could just be a completely nonprofit company and just give everything away, I would. Sure. You know, I don't really have, I don't really foresee that I need so much money and all this stuff. I would rather leave a sort of legacy to my kids. Yeah. And I'd rather like live by example now that I have girls and for them to see that mommy built something of like integrity. Yeah. So I think I've always had to keep like, I've never lost sight of it. Yeah. But it's always like, how am I going to make it happen? How am I going to, scrap to find the money to be able to give back? And how can I do this? So I'm always kind of questioning that way. And then it was funny because this year I was like, if I just don't put it down, like exactly what I want to do, it's never going to happen.
Right.
So, and not that it's never going to happen, but I've got to see it into fruition.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to like will it and write it down and put it and see it and be able to start creating so much success and momentum that we can start really ultimately giving back.
You do a lot of manifesting, it sounds like, you know, not so much in terms of long-term planning, but more so speaking it into existence and kind of letting the process take care of itself. As far as that process is concerned, what is it that you do on a daily basis to facilitate your manifestation?
I always, like, I'm one of these people that I put myself where I want to ultimately be. You know, I have pictures in my wallet of, interesting, because like Bridget Bardot, although she was a supermodel, she was like really into being like an animal activist, but I loved her style, but I loved that she was known for being an activist, almost more than like her beauty at the end of it. And so I do things like that. I'll write stuff down, and I'll take certain pictures of people that I'm like, I want to be known for, even though I'm in style and I'm in fashion, I want to be known for the good that I'm trying to create and the community that I'm trying to create, more so than other things. But I put myself, and not in like a narcissistic manner, but I'll be like, if I want to be like the next Dion von Furstenberg, I've got to look, be, act, feel, know that that is who I am becoming every single day. And so like the closer that I get to manifesting who I am, who I want to be, the closer I'll write it, the more finite I get with, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is what I actually can create. Because for a long time I had this mindset that in the back of my head, because everyone told me I was going to fail. I would always say, well, what if I fail? And I had this breakthrough moment in 2018, at the beginning of 2018, where I was at this networking event, and I was asked to be one of the people to stand up and tell my goal. And I never out loud said, I want to be a globally recognized brand. And after that day, everything changed for me. It was like every day I woke up and I was going to be this business owner and this brand owner and this woman that I wanted to be seen as, and I was going to put her into motion. And every single day, that's when I started to show up to stories. That's when I started to network like crazy. That's when I started to I no longer had this mindset that I was going to fail. It was like, how am I going to win? How am I going to make this happen? Every day I asked, like, how am I going to push this company forward? How am I going to plant a seed today? Who can I meet that can ultimately, and I'm always like, oh, I'm going to get a great email this week. You know, there's always something that I'm always embedding. And then I'll say, you know what, I want to start embedding in California and LA, and I'll start putting out there. And then it's like interesting how things just start to come, you know, or I'll say, oh, I really want to nail this. And I'll start thinking about it, and I'll start putting it into existence. And I'll start talking to people, and I'll just start telling people, this is what I'm looking to do. This is what I want to create. This is what I want to start doing. So that's interesting. You know, another thing about business, because I talk so much about my story, is that, you know, I got into this business, and everyone always told me, you can only do handbags. You can only do handbags. You can only do handbags. And now I'm starting to realize, like, oh my gosh, I can now, with the power of social media and Instagram and this connection that I have with my community, I'm starting to realize that things can expand upon just handbags. And so that's something else that we're really going to start dabbling with in 2020. And
a little diversification.
Diversifying a little bit more. And, you know, you get into a business, and then you start seeing, okay, well, how am I actually going to make money in what I do? Because now I spent all these years building it. And now it's like, okay, well, how do we now like really actually like make money, you know? And it's just and so that's, I think it's always the money struggle. It's always like, okay, well, if I have this much money injection, how am I going to spend it, and what am I going to put it to? So a big next thing for me is just doing a lot of collaborations to see kind of like where I can start dabbling into other than just handbags. So I think it's interesting when you get into business to start saying, okay, you know, you're in business for, now I'm going on like 4 years here. Like, okay, here's what's working, here's what's not working. And now we've got to really start finiting this thing to, you know, to make sure that we can get to where we're ultimately trying to go.
1,000 handbags or 1,000 backpacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and then that's just really the start. But I think ultimately I just have no ego attached to this. I just really want it to work for women. I want it to work for my girls. I want it to work because I've had this dream for so long that I've been pushing through, you know? So it would be really cool to see it. It's all starting to really
It's going to happen
together.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I think just starting a different conversation in fashion where women really start to realize that you are iconic and you deserve to be respected.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good conversation to start having.
Sure. Well, we definitely want to make sure that you're supported and, you know, you cast the broadest net possible. So for my tribe, the 20%ers out there, where can they find you, support you, and, you know, move the needle for you, with you towards that 100 backpack or 1,000 backpack contribution?
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram. I'm the Sage Aubrey, TheSageAubrey. Even if you're not into fashion, you just have to watch my stories.
You got style. I mean, it's. I'm not in purses.
It's okay.
I like your stuff.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even if you're
My
not
wife,
into fashion,
it's on the Christmas list.
That's awesome.
Don't tell my wife.
She'd be adorable in a Sage Aubrey, and it's so befitting of her personality too. She's like totally a Sage Squad member. But besides that, and then online, www.sageaubrey.com. You can check out our handbags. You can message me. I'm really a huge advocate of women. That's what I've really become known in this valley for. Is I really try to uplift other women, and we really try to help each other in this community. So it's a big thing for me. So I would love to meet all of you guys.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. And thank you so much for having me.
No, absolutely.
I feel like I did way too much talking.
No. If I'm doing all the talking, something's wrong.
Okay.
No, amazing. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're super busy. And I think that my audience is going to get a lot of value out of your story, especially the women out there that are like on the fence about playing bigger. You have such an empowering story, and there's a lot of women in my network and inner circle that I know personally that just need to hear more stories like yours. So I really appreciate you being vulnerable and authentic in the way that you tell it.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. And I just hope that if there's just one woman that listens to this and understands that, you know, business is really hard.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me in the beginning. I literally had a moment one day where I was like, I've got to figure out how to unemotionally attach from these emails that I get from these manufacturers. Like I've got to literally, because it would almost give me so much anxiety that I couldn't even open up the email.
Yeah.
And so that's been a muscle that I've had to like just hone over time. And I still do. Like when I had an email this morning from my manufacturer, I'm like, you're not emotionally attached to this.
Right.
This is business.
Sure.
And this is how you look at this. This is nothing to do with you. It's nothing to take personal. It's just something we get through.
Right.
And it's a muscle because we as women are emotional and we tend to be like so directly connected to what we do that we just have to learn to just bulldoze right through it.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Some days are easier than others.
Well, I'm really looking forward to everything that you have coming down the way. And any way that, you know, 20%ers can support that effort, you know, I want to be a resource for you.
That's
for
awesome.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for coming to my corner.
Oh, totally. Yeah, 100%.
That's awesome.
You know, for our tribe out there, you 20%ers, remember, focus on what matters: health, wealth, relationships, and time. And we'll see you next week.